All right, so welcome to succession planning for sustainable VIOs. That's volunteering involving organizations. Succession planning. So today we're going to talk about what is succession planning. We're going to explore how do you know if you need it, what roles need succession planning, the core elements of a succession plan. I stopped writing succession plan by then, just SP. What are the barriers? I think we're all going to be quite familiar with those, but some that will be a little bit new. And then now what? Like, you know what it is, you know what the elements and the barriers are, now what? So it gives you a very simple handout to take that next step. Okay. What is succession planning? So succession planning isn't about pushing people out and naming replacements too early. It's actually a proactive process to prepare for role transitions. And that could be role transitions next week, next month, next year. But really, it's about making sure knowledge and skills and leadership are shared and developed over time. So it's all about the development, not about replacement. So when quite often people hear the word succession planning, they're thinking, oh, you know, it's about booting people out. It's not. It's about development, and it's just being a proactive process. So that's really, really key when you first start having those conversations to make it quite clear. How do you know if you need it? Are any of these scenarios familiar to you? Perhaps you have an over-reliance on one or two key volunteers. Perhaps leaders are hinting at stepping down. Quite possible. Alternatively, maybe recruitment is really hard. It's like getting people to walk over hot coals. People would rather walk over hot coals than come to your AGM and step into a position on your committee. How do you know you need it? Well, past handovers have not worked with little or no documentation. So I'm sure you might be familiar with the expert that you used to have, who knew, you know, maybe 10 of the 10 things that you needed to know for that key position. When they handed over, they maybe only handed over 10 of those things, but they got forgotten, which turned into 7. Next person to hand over, they turn it over. Remember, they remember possibly only 5. And so it gets on and further down the track until you may well have someone stepping into a role with no prior knowledge, with no handover that's of any real value. So it's all about the documentation and making it really simple. We're not talking pages and pages of stuff here. Also, how do you know if you need it? So are you familiar if you're in a group where there are no new ideas? It's just the same old ideas being suggested. There's no real new ideas, and there's no growth opportunities. So quite possible you may have people joining the group who after a certain amount of time just leave because they don't feel that they're being valued, they have anything to add, and they can't see a way to contribute to the group because you've got the same old people in the same old roles over and over again. So succession planning is about fixing these problems, about coming up with new ideas and providing growth opportunities for the people that you already have. If you still need convincing, business as usual is underappreciated gap fillers. What actually happens when you succession plan is your volunteers feel valued and supported. Business as usual is roles are too big for one person. Succession planning is all about making roles manageable and clearly defined. Oh, sorry. Business as usual is ask Barbara, which is the default answer for everything. So it's about an overdependency on key people. So if you've got that in your group, you could well need succession planning. In succession planning, knowledge is shared, not siloed. It's an open book. Business as usual without succession planning is handovers are rushed, if at all. Group instability and incoming leaders feel completely underprepared. With succession planning, leadership transitions are smooth. And it isn't always just about leadership as well. It's just about being part of the group. So people to join the group, transitions will be really smooth if they know what's going on. Business as usual without succession planning is action bottlenecks, stagnation or collapse when leaders exit. So quite often you might be waiting on the same people for some paperwork, and then you wait for the same people to get into that system. And so it just causes a backlog. Whereas with succession planning, roles are shared and the organization basically thrives beyond individual people. It really is a kind of a no-brainer. The key roles that need succession planning, well, anybody that's a volunteer coordinator, a team, project leader, board member, specialized technical roles, long-serving go. Actually, to be honest, no. Succession planning is needed for any role that you can't do without. So it could be something as simple maybe as the person who knows how to I don't know, open the canteen, for example, or the person that knows how to open the community hub, knows where all the keys are on the electrical. You know, if you put the kettle on at the same time as that thing that the electric flips. Any of that knowledge, any role that you have in your organization needs a succession plan, without a doubt. You basically just have to ask, if that person who's doing it stepped away tomorrow, would it be a problem? Would it stop functioning? Okay. So with succession planning, what we recommend is you ease onto it and you set the stage. Make sure that those conversations are early and open at all time for all people in your group. So early conversations reduce anxiety for both outgoing and incoming. The transition should be normalized and celebrated, not treated as failures. So if you have a position that, or a person that has a great deal of responsibility in your group, then succession planning for that role shouldn't be about, you know, a failure to be able to do it all. It needs to be celebrated that you're able to document the process, document the role quite easily, and celebrate that person for what they've done before, because it's been a huge role that they've managed to do up till now. But succession planning is going to make things easier for them and your group in the long term. Definitely allow overlap, and a thoughtful handover honors contribution and sets up successors for success. So don't frame it as a replacement activity. So what I'm saying, don't spring it on Barbara at the next committee meeting, basically. We need to normalize it. We need to say that it's a succession plan for the whole group, to make things easier based on, if we don't do it, these are the things that's going to happen. Okay. Any questions so far? No. Jess, Lindsay, everything makes sense so far? Yeah, cool. Okay. So as I said, this is the focus. Succession is legacy building, not about replacement. It's about personal development of your existing group and mentoring, not about giving them overwhelming lists of stuff that they're going to be equally as overwhelmed by. Okay, so that's the setting of it. The core elements of a succession plan, and this is actually a handout that I will email out to everyone after this. So the core elements of a succession plan, and we'll go through these in a bit more detail, but they are, in general, identifying the critical roles. We've identified that most roles in your community group are pretty critical. Putting very easy, simple role descriptions and expectations in. That helps people who are coming in, if you have an AGM and people are like, well, I don't really know what the money bags kind of person does. And it's like, well, here you do. This is what we expect. This is the expectations. And they're like, oh, that's actually all right. I could do that. So it's about being very clear. Skills and a competent, that skills and the competency matrix. We'll talk about that a little later. Document your knowledge. Oops, pardon. I know, I'm not saying. Here we go. Leadership development and mentoring. So it's about taking the people who are already in your organization and offering some form of mentoring. And that doesn't have to be overly formal. You may well be doing it already. Transition and handover process. So that, like I say, could be over a long period. It could be something that's not happening yet, But if you're going through the core elements of preparing your succession plan, this might come along a little bit later. And then once you are doing that, because we also prefer an overlap, setting up clear kind of reviews and updates and timelines so that the position descriptions, for example, are not set in stone and they develop over the time. And if you've spent 20 minutes on just putting a succession plan together, because I have promised that's pretty much all you would need for a very simple group, you can update that if you put it in your calendars for every 6 months, or maybe just follow it just before the AGM. And it's just about reviewing it and adding and taking away any things that aren't relevant. So succession planning is a system. It's not necessarily a document manual that sits on a shelf. So each element works together, the clarity, the development, and the transition. And even simple plans are better than none, especially when you've got volunteers that are perhaps taking on too much, or you're having trouble recruiting, or perhaps your committee has turned into a potentially toxic environment. Succession planning is something that you can put in to help you spread the knowledge and yeah, definitely minimize that toxic environment with people being overworked. So the critical roles, I won't mention Barbara too much more, but really we recommend that you break down those core big duties. So typically in a committee, you have what I call the 4 horsemen of the committee apocalypse. You've got president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. We encourage you to break those down further. So maybe the president of VP can stay as is, but potentially the secretary role and the treasurer role, break those down into smaller, more manageable pieces. So maybe you have one person that takes the minutes of your meetings and sends them out. Maybe another person does the social media. Another person, again, maybe just manages the AGM or the memberships. There's really nothing to say that you cannot break these big roles down into smaller parts, as long as the conditions of your constitution are met. We really recommend you do that to make them more manageable and easier to recruit into, basically. So we say have some fun with them. So in your committee or group that you have, yeah, have people that maybe just print posters and put them up. Maybe one person just checks the emails. Maybe someone just has the ute in the trailer. People are much more inclined to step in and help when they know that the size of the help needed. So having a clear time that you want them and a clear expectation is much more likely to get you some helpful volunteers for your group, because basically no one wants to be treasurer. Eh? When you're doing your role descriptions, keep them really simple and the expectations clear. You would include key contacts, relevant relationships, any relevant timelines, reporting requirements, any processes, and maybe a little bit of history and the why. So if you potentially have moved over to a new program, it's worth documenting why you've done that, so that 3 or 4 kind of processes years down the line, people go, oh, we should use that program. If it's actually documented that this is the reason why you're using this one, because you used to use that one, it doesn't work, then it's going to pretty much help you long term. When you're putting down your role descriptions, separate what the role requires from how the current person does it. Quite often you'll find that people obviously like to do things that are more familiar to them. If you can actually separate the duties as opposed to you use this program to do this, then you're more likely to get a little bit more flexibility than, well, we have to use paper and pen because, well, that's the way we've always done it. Whereas, recommending something like Google Drive, Google Mail, will obviously be much more flexible and useful to your group in the long term than keeping your computer all on keeping it all on Barbara's computer. So how the current person does it is not necessarily how you need to be putting that in your role description and expectations. And keep the document updated. So yeah, just an annual or a 6-month review of that wouldn't take long, but it just means that you're up to date. Oh, by the way, these are my role descriptions. I hope you like them. Good with source. Yeah, my favorite. In case you're thinking that all this documentation sounds like a complete nightmare and it's going to take too long, I would highly recommend using apps, using AI. So for example, Otter here. Otter is a free app, and you can put that on your phone and press record, and it will transcribe everything that you say. So for example, if you're sitting down with your maybe current secretary and you have a printed list of things you want to discuss, you say, right, let's go treasurer. How do you do the banking? You can click on Otter, they can tell you how it's done, and then you will have the text there to edit into easy dot points. So yeah, tapping it all in, sort of manhandled, as I call it, will take a little bit longer than using something like Otter, for example. Scribe. Now, Scribe is a really great app platform. So what that does is you log in, and then it will take screenshots of what you click on your screen. So, for example, if you wanted to explain to someone how they put an out of office message onto their emails, you would log into Scribe. You then would open your Outlook or Google Mail, and every time you click on something different on your screen, so settings, for example, and then you would scroll down and click on something else, it takes a screenshot and it describes what you have just done. It's a bit of a game changer because there's no longer need to just keep taking screenshots and stuff like that. Scribe will do it for you. And once you've clicked on complete the process, it will then put that into a nice PDF for you. So yeah, big game changer. Highly recommended, different apps like that. So who's filling those shoes? So you've got your role descriptions, and you're looking for people who you think could step into those roles. Leadership potential or roles, people taking on roles of responsibility can show up in very small ways. A lot of your volunteers might not see themselves as suitable for a particular role or job, but until they're encouraged, until they're given maybe a tap on the shoulder. And remember that if you've got your role description and your expectations clearly on a one-pager, they are much more likely to step into that role. But part of succession planning is inviting people to grow, not just waiting for people to step up themselves. So a simple conversation with someone to plant the seed about, well, are you interested, or rather, would you like to develop these skills? Is much more likely than sitting back in a committee and going, right, who wants to be treasurer? Who wants to be secretary? Let's crack on with it. The question is, how do we choose who should mentor? Realistically, we don't really have a choice. It's usually more the people that you have available. And so you need to be looking at people who are eager and willing to share. And we can deal with those that necessarily might not want to share. And those maybe demonstrate some like problem solving skills, or it's basically about encouragement. And I would say don't discount anybody. And if you remember one thing, here is an example of that. Jon Snow. Jon Snow had no leadership potential at all. So don't judge leadership potential by what people are doing at the moment. So Jon Snow, he begins in Game of Thrones as a complete outsider. He was, excuse my language, a bastard, excluded from inheritance and political legitimacy, socially unknown, with no clear future, no prospects at all, very naive, no leadership potential. But look where he is now. He's shown with true leadership, he's actually smashed it. So when you're looking at people, you go, oh, I don't know, I don't think Sarah's really model material. Think of Jon Snow. If Jon can do it, they can do it. All right. Right. Skills, competency matrix. This is something that we have a handout for, so you'll receive this afterwards. Skills competency matrix. So what we've got across the top here, this is when you're looking at key roles, and matrix is just a fancy word for a table, let's face it. So you're looking at the particular role that you want filled or you want to describe. Who is the current person that's responsible for it? What are the skills required for that role? The current skills, potential, and maybe the skills gap of that person that you're thinking that might be suitable. And then simple action steps to break down what it will take for that person to gain experience. Okay, so we're just going to go through this now with different roles in a group that I'm involved in. Here we go. President or chief shenanigator, responsible for overseeing the daily operations and managing the team. Skills for that: leadership, decision-making, communication. Currently, that would be me. Potentially, it could be Bob or it could be Carol. What are the skill gaps for those people? Well, Bob lacks leadership experience. Okay, what could we do to bring Bob up to potentially being a suitable president? And this isn't something you start 2 weeks before your AGM. This is something that starts now. So Bob, we have a conversation. We say, well, maybe you need a bit of mentoring, maybe with some mentoring help, maybe you can represent the committee at a particular event or something like that. So it's not about throwing people in the deep end. It's about having roles and responsibilities and expectations, and then helping them to, take baby steps. And before you know it, Bob's vying for president. We've got a challenge there. It's really, really simple. And no, sorry, I'm not picking up that phone. All right, let's go for another role. Secretary. So we're talking at emails, meetings, correspondence. So the skills would be to take the minutes, coordinate the meeting, herding cats, basically. Currently, we've got Beck in that role. Potentially, Emily could take up some of that slack. What are the skills gap needed? She's got no Google platform experience. Okay, what are the action steps? Maybe just some training in Google, maybe just some shadowing, something like that. Really, really simple steps. Not big, massive roles to send her on a course or something like that. Okay. Next role, treasurer, money bags. So managing the account and reporting. Required skills, accounting, compliance. Well, really, if you break it down, you might actually find that there's some smaller skills that Hannah, who's currently in the role, can share with Ian, who's got no compliance experience. So maybe it might be an online course. It might be maybe reviewing financial reports with Hannah for 15 minutes following the next meeting. So mapping the potential successors means that you can early on identify who they might be and think of ways that they could top up their skills so that they're, come around to AGM time, quite possible ready to step in, or at least shadow and be your second. Because, if things happen, you want to know that you're definitely prepared there. So after treasurer, oh, sorry, John, don't want to see you anymore. So program lead. So maybe you've got activities and projects, and it's the same old people doing those, which is great, but potentially burnout and whatnot can occur. So you really want to identify those people that haven't maybe stepped into running a program as yet, and maybe a tap on the shoulder and a bit of encouragement, they could actually step up in the future. So you put program lead, responsible for planning and running events or activities. What are the skills required? Might be leadership, project management, budgeting, community engagement. It can vary. Currently, David and Sarah are doing a lot of this, but potentially Emily could be tapped on the shoulder to, potentially run a project of her own. but she needs budgeting experience and confidence. So maybe some Excel training and maybe shadowing David for 2 events or more. This is the thing. If you start this early, you've got plenty of time for these people to gain experience doing this thing. People are like, oh, I don't know how to take minutes. Well, that's okay. How about the next meeting? You shadow Barbara, who does the minutes, and maybe you do it. And so she does it as a backup, but you at least get more experience. It's all about confidence for a lot of these things. And maybe you've got a communications person. So maybe you've got the same people doing the social media and the newsletters all the time. The skills are writing, digital tools, marketing. Fiona's currently doing, but George I reckon George would be great at doing this. He's got limited marketing experience, but get him some Canva and Meta training. Maybe he co-writes the newsletter with Fiona a couple of times. It's all about taking baby steps, as I said. So highlighting the gaps is just identifying the roles that have no clear successor, and just simple development. For each gap, assign a small achievable step to build skills and experience. It really is. Doing this competency matrix is as simple as just the role, responsible, the skills, and then looking around. Maybe you don't have anyone for that, but and maybe you do, but you don't have to replace them with exactly the same type of person. The thing is to share responsibility as much as possible and break those roles into micro kind of volunteering roles, which is best. Don't put your eggs in one basket, as my mum says. So in terms of transferring that knowledge and documentation, maybe you have someone in your current group that is the gatekeeper of all that knowledge. Knowledge loss is actually one of the biggest risks in volunteer groups. The documentation that you put together for it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be usable. So remember that app, Otter AI. It basically will transcribe everything that you say. So I really highly recommend it. So succession planning is a system. It's not a document that sits on a shelf. Think of it as leaving breadcrumbs for the next person. So we encourage shared directories, cloud-based, document passwords, file locations, standardize your naming conventions. That basically means when you're saving files, save the files in a particular way, naming them as maybe project, volunteer week 2026, budget. And then next year you just change the year and things like that. So just really standardize how you save all your files. It will make finding them in your Drive, Google Drive, a lot easier. Have a need to know contacts and timelines. So essentials, should everything go crazily wrong, someone can come along and pick it up after you. And paired documentation with not live knowledge. So that's basically about making sure that you have it documented, but also there are people around that actually know how to interpret that. So make it as really simple as possible. When you're putting together your documentation, these are kind of the broad brushstrokes of folders that we suggest that you start saving your information in. So you've got your constitution and governance things here, your meetings, your AGMs, all that kind of stuff in one file here. And you might limit the access to those, or you might not. You could have your committee or group of 6 people. They might have access to everything except maybe financial records. It's entirely up to you. It's a great thing about Google Drive. You can basically allow access to as many or as few people as you want. So your constitution, meetings and AGM and governance, then you have all your financial records, your profit and loss, those kind of things. Over here, we've got branding and comms. So any Canva, social media type stuff, any posters you've designed. Maybe you have a page with all your branding in. So the font you use, your logos, your colors, all that kind of stuff. In this one, programs and events. So it might be your grants that you've, sorry, not your grants, but your programs that you deliver, or your contacts, things like that. And then any grants that you might apply for in here. And then we always, when we apply for grants, we call them a particular folder within the grants. And then we just do a link to it when we actually, if we get the funding, we do the project as well. And then you've got your admin. So your role descriptions, your templates, your passwords, all that kind of stuff. And you can lock things down in here, like I say, really, really easily. This simple folder group is great for basically retaining the knowledge. And like I say, everyone can have a different access level depending on the roles that they have. But what we highly recommend is when you finish a program, you basically load everything up into its own subfolder. So maybe the application, the budget, the invoicing, the supporting letters, the summary, the photos, the acquittal, all of it in a subfolder. So it's easy for the next person to come along and just pick it up and see what you did last time. Highly, highly recommended. It's about sharing the knowledge, not keeping it all locked up tight for just a few. So in terms of developing people in your group for potential roles, really it is about confidence, and these are some of the things that you can do with those people, whether they've got low or no confidence. It doesn't take big courses and stuff like that. So we've got mentoring and shadowing, delegated responsibilities. So maybe just a trial of a particular role or action that you want them to take. So just delegate it and give them peer support. So peer-to-peer learning circles, skill swaps and training. So maybe it might be something you add to one of your meetings. At the end of your meeting is you have a 5-minute presentation by someone who maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to think now, does second payments or something. They can maybe just do a verbal presentation of how that works, not giving away passwords and stuff like that, but just to do a short presentation of I make second payments and this is how I do it, just so that people go, oh, that's all right, that's not that difficult, is it? So sharing, that's peer learning circles, sharing your knowledge, feedback and reflection, recognition and motivation. So you can use any of the following. Basically, whatever suits that person best. If you think, peer-to-peer learning might be a great way to encourage them to take a step in the direction, then try that. But lots of recognition and motivation is also key. So when people are trialing new things, big them up on socials, big them up in maybe your meetings and whatnot. It's all about recognizing and motivating people to want to do more and step into different roles in your group. Okay. So transition and handover. This can be a little bit sticky. If perhaps the succession planning hasn't been introduced possibly correctly, and it's seen as a replacement type thing. So the transition and handover is easier when you obviously fix succession planning as not a replacement exercise, okay? So when you're transitioning and handover, this is, let's call her Edith. This is Edith. She's very helpful in her local group, and they can't do without her. But, Edith has a lot of information that really we need to get out of her head and onto paper. So one of the things to avoid here is to avoid the I'll just keep doing this little bit mentality. So if you're sharing the role with other people, you need to know everything. And Edith might still be obviously doing her bit, and that's great, but make sure that you are very clear if you are transitioning to another person when the responsibility moves over. And if it's a complete transition to a new person, then really avoid the, I'll just keep doing this, love. I'll just, because it just, there will never be a point where you can say enough. That's not what you're doing anymore, Edith. You're supposed to be doing this. Check-ins and support is really useful. I would say the biggest compliment for me personally, when I do a handover, is no one notices that I've gone. No one notices that there's someone new doing it. There's no, oh my God, we really want you back. Biggest compliment is I've done a proper handover. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of attitude that you really, really want to encourage. And this is a little story about a jealous mother-in-law. watch out for best jam scenarios. So the story goes, there was a man with a new wife he loves very much, and she's very good at cooking. And he says to her, "Oh, you know what? I'd really love it if you made, can you make strawberry jam?" And the bride said, "Oh, I think I can. Yes, no, yeah, I'll give it a go." Because what? Nobody makes strawberry jam like my mum. You get her recipe and you go, "Oh, it's just delicious." Anyway, so she goes to her mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law says, "Oh, yeah, yeah, sure." So her mother-in-law hands over the recipe. The wife goes back, daughter-in-law goes back, makes the jam, and her husband tries it, and he goes, "Yeah, it's nice, but it's not as good as my mum's." And you know what the sly old mother-in-law had done? She hadn't given her the full recipe. She's actually adjusted the amount of sugar in the recipe. So there was no way the daughter-in-law was ever going to make jam as good as her mother-in-law's. So that's what we call the best jam scenario. So when you're having a handover, make sure that you can get the full story, the full information, as much as possible. And that can be handled from how you pitch what succession planning about is again. I mean, in a perfect world, it would be great, but just be aware that you may not get the full picture. That's all. But we don't want to be jealous mother-in-laws. Any questions so far at all? No? Cool. Okay, timeline. Quick wins. Something to start today. Identify one role, just one role in your group. Start with something small. Document the basics of that role. And I have handouts about, I have a template that you can use for this. So document the basics of the role. Start a succession conversation with the person that's currently in that role. And as we said earlier, pitch it with, it's about sharing responsibility. It's about enabling support for people. Pair someone to shadow or co-lead. And then schedule a simple review. So you don't need a full succession plan to start today. You just need one small action. Maybe identify one role that would cause a bit of hiccup if it was suddenly vacant. So you want to document the essentials, key tasks, timelines, contacts, and tools. And it could be as simple as just 1 pages. Make sure that you frame the conversation around sustainability and support, not exit. That will avoid the best jam scenarios. And then invite another volunteer to shadow or co-responsibility-ishness. So this will definitely reduce the pressure on one person. And then, like we say, with the review, put a recurring reminder in the calendar to review the roles and the plans at least once a year. Succession planning is easily sustainable when it becomes part of a routine. So just remember that small steps taken today will prevent a big problem tomorrow at the AGM. So some common barriers that you may hear if you're taking this back to your group is that we just don't have time for this, or we just don't have time for succession planning. Well, if not now, when? Would you prefer it when we come around to the AGM and there's no one who wants to step in? You want to do it now. To those people who say, well, obviously they've got a concern about losing control or relevance, sharing shows leadership and confidence. To not share shows insecurity. So you don't be having to point any fingers here, but the pitch to succession planning to your group is about confidence, not insecurity. The challenge will be ingrained dependence on long-serving volunteers. It'll be Edith knows everything. Well, you're risking burnout with no new ideas or new volunteers. You may have people who join your committee, faced with Edith, the gatekeeper of all knowledge. They'll just do a U-turn and leave. You want new people, you want new blood, you want new ideas. Perhaps you haven't got anybody in a position that you think is suitable, so you've got limited confidence in your alternatives. Well, Jon Snow, given opportunity and support, confidence follows responsibility. Small baby steps is good. And you will face resistance to change and new approaches, but adapting ensures stability and long-term impact. It's better for the group as a whole, not necessarily the individual that's in that position. So if you can pitch these things in your group about how succession planning is, and these slides will be available, it really, really will help. The majority of people will support you, and you'll be able to take that first step as well. So in summary, succession planning is an investment, not a contingency. It depends on shared leadership. And planning today ensures impact tomorrow with strong transitions, building stronger communities. It really is never too late to begin. And I think this is pretty apt. Jill's retirement party and succession planning kickoff meeting. Yeah, cutting it kind of close there.